So good evening, everybody, and welcome. I hope you had a wonderful Purim. I had a wonderful Purim, most of which I can remember. Up until the point that I remembered, it was great. Beyond that, you'll have to ask somebody else. So, as is our practice, and I really, really wish we could stop doing this, we dedicate the learning, the zchut of our learning, to the return safely of our captives, also for refuah shlema to the cholim and the pitzuim, our soldiers who have been wounded on the field of battle. We certainly daven for the safety of our chayalim, our brave chayalim who are in the field, and the safety for all Achenu B'nai Israel who are in trouble really all over the world. Overall, we're looking for protection against our enemies and protection against our friends, which unfortunately we need. And for victory, a complete and utter and final victory over modern day Amalek, over Hamas, biyachad nenatzeach. Okay, so we are continuing our exploration of the Shaar Habitachon. So the Chovot HaLevavot tells us that this is a foundational principle, and we need to really, really integrate that into our consciousness for us to grow ultimately in our Ahavat HaShem. So simply put, but not easy, it is putting our complete and utter trust into the Kadosh Baruch Hu, turning over the keys to Him 100%, so to speak. So it is coming to the acceptance that whatever happens to us is the result of decisions that the Kadosh Baruch Hu has made, and He has made for us, and they are ultimately for our good. And we began last week exploring how having bitachon should, on a practical level, impact our lives, right? Meaning, how should bitachon manifest itself in our day-to-day lives and in things that are important to us? And the Chovot HaLevavot that we talked about last time enumerated 7 different areas of our life that we need to place our bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And he says that bitachon is both passive and active. While we need to have 100% bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu, at the same time, we play a role in this as well. The role that we play, the things that we need to do, we call that hishtadlut. When they had the trial, at the Hague.
Oh, what's that?
In South Africa. So the person who was presenting the case, somebody had taken his pages out of order. So obviously I'm suffering from the same disease. And you will see, and we will see, that even the part we play, even the things that we need to do, this hishtadlut, adds to our bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay? So these 7 areas he lists out continues to support the division of our lives, right? Between our guf, our bodies, our physicality, and our neshama, our spiritual side, right? He also lists out areas that have to do with olam hazeh, where we need to have bitachon, and olam haba. So here are the areas. First, are matters that pertain to our health and well-being of our bodies physically. In other words, we have to have bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu for our health. We need to believe that at the end of the day, the Kadosh Baruch Hu determines mi yechia, mi yamut, and that having been said, we still have a proactive responsibility to take care of our health. This is, in fact, a Torah mitzvah. We can't say that since my health is determined by the Kadosh Baruch Hu and He is ultimately responsible, I can do whatever I like, right? And que sera, sera. But by way of illustration, Ibn Bakuda brought a case of an individual who drank poison as a way of saying, if HaShem has determined that I will live a long life, then I can do whatever I want in this life, and He's going to deliver the number of years that He promised. And we cited the Ramchal in the Mesilat Yesharim, who said, quote, someone who does not want to guide himself in an intelligent manner and exposes himself to dangers. This is not trust in God, but rather foolishness, i.e., he's an idiot. Such a person sins in that he is acting against the will of God, who desires that a man protect himself. So that's area number one, and we spent a lot of time doing that. Second area, which we started, also related to our physicality, but it has to do with how we sustain ourselves, meaning making a living. For many of us, if not all of us, this is the area where our bitachon gets tested the most. Will we have enough to survive is a constant concern. And it's a constant concern really at any age. I could only find statistics for the US, okay? But in 2023, 78% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck, which means that every 78%, almost 80% of the United States were 2 paychecks away from bankruptcy. So you can feel how that would add to a sense of insecurity. But bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu means that we are guaranteed by the Kadosh Baruch Hu that he will always provide what we need to survive. And we shouldn't worry. So what we talked about last time, we described it as kind of an annual contract that the Kadosh Baruch Hu gives us after Yom Kippur, right? And this is an amount that he guarantees us will sustain us for the year at a minimum. But like the water in the ground, right, that we gave as an example, if you want to draw water, you still need to dig the well, right? You need to get the bucket, and you need to bring the water out of it. We must do what we need to do to earn the money. But we have to understand that that money is magia lano. It's going to come to us. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this today. Okay? Step 3, up till now, we have been talking about what impacts me physically, right? And that's really, we had mentioned the lower level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Things that we need to survive. If you go up one more level, it's social needs. So here, after the physical needs are met, we have to have bitachon in our personal relationships, right? And the people around us. Right? We'll talk about near the end in terms of another major challenge that people have, and that's being lonely. Right? That's what happens when you don't have the social interactions that you need. And you need to have the faith in the Kadosh Baruch Hu to that will be provided. Number 4, comes the idea of reward in this world for me keeping the mitzvot in this world. Both the mitzvot of the heart, the emotional mitzvot that we're talking about here, and the mitzvot of the limbs, the physical mitzvot. But these are ones that only impact me, right? Those mitzvot are things like lighting candles Friday night or putting on tefillin, right? For example. The next are rewards in this world for mitzvot that we do that involve other people, right? So an example of that is, Pardon? Charity. Giving tzedakah is a great example. You can't give tzedakah unless there's somebody else to receive it. And we have lots of mitzvot like that. 6 is having bitachon in HaShem when there is a reward due to us in Olam Haba. Right? We have been told again and again that there is a reward waiting for us in the zechut of all the mitzvot that we do. And 7 is we have bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu that we will be rewarded beyond what we really deserve. That the Kadosh Baruch Hu in his chesed, in his chesed HaShem, will give us more in the Olam HaEmet, depending on how we behave here. We're not going to get this now. We're not going to talk about today. Next week. Sorry. Sure. Of these 7 areas, we covered the first and part of the second, and that's where we left off. Ad kan. So he's going to go on. Does it matter how I earn my money, what I do for a living? How much control do I really have over it? And because this really hits home and is the top of the list of areas that either deepen our bitachon or HaShem, or in some ways can destroy it, the Chovot HaLevavot is emphasizing that the Kodesh Baruch Hu will provide his, what I'm calling GMI, which is guaranteed minimum income, for the economists among us, no matter what one chooses to do for a living. Now, I had mentioned last time that the Gemara in Ketubot asks the question about a father who has to recommend to his son what he should do for a living. And the Gemara says, I have nothing to recommend, because every living, people are successful and people are unsuccessful. Right? It depends on the individual, it depends on the field and the timing, but there's no way to say you should be a fisherman and you'll be great, or you'll be a farmer, or you'll be a real estate, because everything is dependent on the presence of the Kodesh Baruch Hu. And similarly here, the Kodesh Baruch Hu is saying it doesn't matter what profession you go into, you are guaranteed this GMI over the course of the year, or sometime during the year. And meaning that if I'm a wage earner, where it's easier for me to see based on my paycheck and project out and feel what it is I'm going to get for the year, or if I'm a stockbroker, which depends on customers coming in and depends on the health of the market, where it may be harder for me to feel that things are guaranteed. Regardless of how I think I will be supported, my mindset needs to be the same. That the minimum that I need, I will be provided by the Kodesh Baruch Hu, no matter what channel I am looking to receive that GMI. So the bottom line is that when we are certain we will receive this amount of income, I don't have to worry about survival, right? And the result is the peace of mind that I receive and the tranquility of the soul that we spoke about when we first talked about the benefit. So I was trying to capture an example of this. And I think, and again, I apologize for an American-centered example, but think about what it's like to live in the United States where healthcare is not guaranteed. And you're always worried that something's going to happen and it'll either not be available to you because you can't afford it, or it will break the bank. And compare that to here. Now, I understand that the healthcare system here does not run and operate like the Swiss trains, but the truth is, it's no longer a concern. You know, if you need to see a doctor, you'll see a doctor. You know, if you need an operation, you'll get an operation. You know, if you need the care, you'll get the care, right? It's taken off your plate and given to somebody else. Now, imagine if your earning a living was like that too. It's no longer your concern. In the healthcare, you have to make the appointment, you have to schlep everywhere, you have to get MRIs in the middle of the night, in the middle of Dimona, but still, it's there. You have to do your hishtadlut, but it doesn't weigh on your mind. So, lahavdil, think about when you're talking about having the Kodesh Baruch Hu in charge, he's in charge, and it will be there when you need it. He does add a caveat in terms of how we should look at the professions that we choose. And he says that while it doesn't matter if you're a trash collector or a corporate mogul, you will get what is preordained for you. It is true. If this is true, then that means that what you should make sure is that whatever you choose, You are earning your money. You're doing your hishtadlut beheter and not be'isr, meaning that you should earn your living in a way that's permitted as opposed to a way that's asr. So a simple example is working on Shabbat. Work on Shabbat is an isr. You're not going to get more money if you work on Shabbat. And you not only won't get more money, but you're going to get punished for it, right? I mean, so it's a double whammy. It's a great Chafetz Chaim story that somebody came to the Chafetz Chaim and he started to work on Shabbat. And the Chafetz Chaim says, you have to understand how it works. You have a water tank with 6 spigots. If you add another spigot, it doesn't get you more water. It just flows out faster and it'll empty faster. So when you're making your decision, since it's not going to get you any more, you have to be careful that you choose wisely. Up until now, we have been talking about this GMI, right? This basic level of sustenance, subsistence. It's hard to understand exactly what that amount is, right? But it is enough for us to live, right? It's enough for us to live. And we said that the Borei Olam will always provide that level of sustenance. What that level is, like we said, is subjective and is not necessarily the same for every individual. In any event, this level of support is guaranteed full period, full stop. And last time we said that it is proven by 2 psukim that are very famous to us, right? One in the Ashrei Potef et Yedecha Masbiel Kol Chai Ratzon, you open your hands and you give to all. The other one is from the Hallel Hagadol, which says Noten Lechem L'chol Basar Ki Li'olam Chasto. He gives out food to all creatures, right? May his mercy endure forever. But the truth is, we know that the Kadosh Baruch Hu gives us more than that, right? We have more than we need just to survive, and we strive for more, right? I mean, I don't know that anybody just wants to just get by. We want comfort, we want security, we even want wealth. This is in our human DNA. The Medrash in Kohelet Rabbah, if you look at the first source, says, Hu inyan ra, it is an evil thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's not the point I want. Nantan Elohim livnei adam la'anot bo. Right? So it is an evil thing that God has given man to engage in. Rabbi Bon Rabbi Bon says, Zo shifato shel mamon. This is striving after money. Amar Rabbi Yudin, b'shem Rabbi Ivo, ein adam yotzei min olam v'chatzi ta'avato biyado. A person does not leave this world having satisfied half of what he desires. And it says, Ella, im idle mea, if he has 100, say 100 shkolim, baye me'avad yiton, tartin mavin. So if he has 100, he wants 200. Ve'im isle tarte mavan, if he has 200, he wants 400. Right? We are an acquisitive creature. Now, as I said, the Midrash looks at this as a bad thing. It's really, in this context, describing the downside of being acquisitive. And I think we can all agree that there is a dark side to this. And I'm pretty sure that we don't need to enumerate all the bad things that happen when people are overly greedy. Right? But nevertheless, that we are a species who want more. And as the great philosopher, I like to bring in outside philosophers, Tevye said in the famous scene in Fiddler on the Roof, when he's talking to his future son-in-law Perchik, who, if you remember, is a communist, and he marries Huddle, he says to Tevye, he being Perchik, money is the word's curse, and Tevye responds, you don't know the quote, may the Lord smite me with such a curse, and may I never recover. The reality, the Torah is not anti-wealth. It's not anti-money. And the Chovot HaLevavot discusses how we should relate to the Kodesh Baruch Hu when he gives us more than we need. How should we think about wealth, right? And how should that impact in our bitachon in the Kodesh Baruch Hu? So Ibn Pakuda says that we need to start from our basic premise of bitachon, which is anything and everything we get comes from the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and anything and everything we get, we receive for our benefit. And he says we need to understand that there are three kinds of income that we get, right? First is obviously the GMI, right, that we have been talking about. That comes from the Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's guaranteed, period, full stop. Next is income which we get that we may not need, but we get it for us to be able to support our families, our children, our grandchildren. That's additional funds. The third level is affluence, which is wealth beyond what we need or what people in our inner circle need. And this money is money that sits in savings. At the end of the day, we may never use it at all, and it gets passed on to our children or our inheritors, right? Sometimes it gets taken away from us in all the many myriad number of ways that people lose money, right? And the mistake that people make is believing that funds in category 2 and category 3 really belong in category 1. Things that we get over and above what we need, that we think that's also money that we can use for what we want. The wealth that we acquire beyond what we need is really part of base sustenance, right? God gave it to me to keep, and it's mine to do with what I like. So here's what he says in source 2. And you'll see right away what he thinks about this. He says, the foolish person considers all the money that the Creator has decreed to be his in the category of income that is for his own sustenance and his own needs. Therefore, he hurries to obtain it. He makes efforts for it, despite the possibility that he is amassing the wealth for the future husband of his wife, his murderer or his greatest enemy, who will inherit it after his death. So that's laying it on the line. Yeah, the future husband of his wife. So here he's talking about his widow, but there are lots of ways where money gets taken to the future husband of your wife. So category 2 and 3 money isn't guaranteed, right? It may be ours temporarily, and we may only receive it occasionally. And so the question becomes, how do we relate to this category of assets that we perceive that the Kodesh Baruch Hu gave us, right? So one way we're supposed to think about it is we have this money as a test. The Kodesh Baruch Hu wants to see what we're going to do with it. There's a camp for children with special needs in New York called Camp HASC. And there are kids who are in wheelchairs and et cetera, and the camp and the staff there are just malach. So they tell the story of one boy who was in Camp HASC. He came from Camp HASC. He told the story there, but it happened in his school. And the boy said to him, to the boy in the wheelchair, why did God put you in a wheelchair? And he answered, he said, to see if he will push me. Right? So things come to us, and it's a test. The Kodesh Baruch Hu wants to see what are we going to do with these funds. So included in this idea is that these funds have been given to us in trust for specific purposes. For example, the Chovot HaLevavot said that some of these funds may rightly belong to category 2 to support our families. And do we use it to support our families? He uses the phrase that we need to return this money to their rightful owners. right? Meaning that those individuals for whom the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us the money in trust to take care of, right? Like our spouses, children, and grandchildren, they're the rightful owners of the money, not us. Some of these funds were earmarked, were given to us by the Kadosh Baruch Hu for either tzedakah to aniyim, right, to those less fortunate, or for other community projects. So I have to look at this money, this pile of money, as something we're supposed to do with it. So the Marpeh Lenefesh, who is a perush on the Chovot HaLevavot, I'm not familiar with this perush, but I saw the citation, and usually I look up the citation to make sure that it's 100% accurate. This is what it says. So we have to rely on the source where I found it. He says that once once these funds are in their possession, begin to believe that this isn't money placed in trust, but funds to be distributed based on their discretion. If he decides not to give to others, then he can keep it, since it starts out it's his. But in reality, according to the Marpeh Lenefesh, the wealthy are merely God's conduits, and that God only gives them the wealth when the pipes are flowing, right? However, if there is no pipe, or the pipe gets clogged, to continue his image, there's no need to give them the wealth, right? Because they're not doing what they're supposed to do with the wealth. And either the Kadosh Baruch Hu will stop the wealth from coming in, or he'll take it away from you. So believing that this wealth is category 1 money begins to create a common mistake. And that is, since they don't believe that the money was given to them for them to be a conduit to distribute to others, they feel that by distributing it to others and giving tzedakah and supporting the community, that the wealthy person is owed a certain degree of honor, adoration, or gratitude in return for his generosity to give the money away that's not his. A third mistake, this is what the Chovot HaLevavot says, a third mistake that a foolish person makes is that while he does give over the sustenance to its owners, as the Creator has indeed ordained that it come through him, he reminds them of his favor towards them, as if he himself sustained them and provided them with their needs from his own money and was kind to them through the sustenance he provided. Therefore, he wants them to thank and praise him profusely on account of the money that he provided them with, and to serve him as a result. Right? So he has taken credit for something that's not his. And I don't know if you've noticed this sometimes with people of means, that unless the plaque is up, right? Not that there's anything wrong with acknowledging people, but you have people who insist, right, that honor come to them for their assistance. So in other words, wealth can foster an undeserved arrogance because you begin to ascribe your wealth to your own efforts, right? The famous pasuk is, "Ba'otzim yadi b'kolchi yasali et ha'chayil hazeh." I did this based on my own efforts, right? The efforts of my hands. So if you believe the money belongs to you, then you're going to think, if I give you from my money, which I own and I earned, and as a result, you owe me. You owe me at a minimum your gratitude, honor, adoration in return. So if you look at it properly, think about it this way. I give you a check to give to the electrician. The electrician comes and you hand them the check. Now, the electrician should say, thank you, but you gave what was due to him from my money, right? You're standing up and saying, aren't I a great person for giving them what's due to them out of somebody else's money, does not really make you a tzaddik. Right? And you have to think about that. Now, It's true. Like I said, the electrician should say thank you for you being the conduit. There's a famous Medrash in Breshit Rabbah. I'm sure you're familiar with it. That talks about how Avram Avinu would invite idolaters into his tent so that they could say a bracha to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. You familiar with that Medrash? I always understood that Medrash as talking about how great he was in Kiruv and in bringing the Kadosh Baruch Hu to the world. Now, that Midrash does deal with that. But I came across the reference of this Midrash in connection to what we're talking about here. So I want to read it so that maybe that we can get it from a different light. So it says, "Haketzad Avram hayam mikabel et ha'ovrim v'et ha'shavim." So how did Avram Avinu, this is source 4, how did he greet and accept passers-by? Misha hayu ochlim v'shotim amar lahem barechu. Those who would eat and drink by him, he would say a blessing. Amar lo man omar. So they would ask him, what blessing should we say? Amar lahem, he says to them, Imru, say this, Baruch el Elyon, blessed be God on high, she'achalnu mishelo, that we have eaten from his food. So think of the mindset that is. They ate from Abraham's food. Abraham prepared it. Right? I mean, when the angels came, he said to his wife, go and prepare food. Right? But the food that he got, which is obviously more than he needed because he's now giving it to others, he understood it was Mishalo. This was food that belonged to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, that was entrusted to him to do this particular part of Kiruv. And if they would not agree to reciting the blessing, I just want to finish the Medrash because I think it's, anyway. So Abraham would say to them, give me what you owe. In other words, pay. He would say, what do I owe you? He would say to him, a cup of wine costs 10 polars, a cup of meat costs 10 polos, and a loaf of bread costs 10 polos. After all, who can provide you with wine in the wilderness? Who can provide you with meat in the wilderness? Who can provide you with a loaf of bread in the wilderness? When he, the guest, would see the trouble that he was causing him, he would say, blessed is God most on high for the food we should eat. Now, just as an aside, this bracha should sound familiar to you. Baruch el Elyon she'achalnu mishelo. When do you hear that phrase? When we bench. When we bench with a mezuman, we acknowledge that the food that we're getting doesn't come from us, it comes from the Kadosh Baruch Hu. We say, Baruch she'achalnu mishelo b'tuvo chayinu. Blessed is God, where we ate from his, and who sustains our life. Or we say, Baruch Eloheinu, if we have. Right? This thought has to be with us in everything, right? Whether it is for our sustenance, comes from the Kadosh Baruch Hu, or whether it's in category 3. So all this leaves us with the following dilemma, right? We all have a pot of money that the Kadosh Baruch Hu has given us, given us some more, some less. How do we know what percentage is in category 1 and what percentage should be in category 2 and 3? It's a good question. And I don't want to spend category 2 and 3 in category 1, because that's going to be a big balagan. That's going to get me into trouble, since that money isn't mine. On the other hand, funds in category 1, I really do want to spend on myself, because that's what the money is intended for. And the answer that, do anybody want to guess what answer Ibn Pakuda gives us? So you think he gives us a percentage? Okay. Anybody else? No. So his answer is act responsibly. Act responsibly. right? To understand what it is you need and what you don't. And only you can really answer that question. There was a baseball player who was very wealthy who had a fleet of 80 automobiles. How many automobiles do you need? Right? Bill Gates had a house with 200 rooms. He and his wife before he got divorced, and his daughter. I don't know if he sat down and said, do I really need it? It's his cheshbon to make. But still, what do I have? What is it do I need? And to assess how to use that which is extra and to determine how to allocate it, understanding that if you don't act responsibly with categories 2 and 3 money, it can be taken away from you, or the flow can be stopped. And the Chovot HaLevavot says, by conducting yourself in this manner, you attain honor in this world as well as reward in the world to come. So there's an interesting Gemara, lots of interesting Gemaras. This one happens to be in Masechet Tubot, I think. Yep. Where Rebbe, who was Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, was on his deathbed. Now, you have to know Rebbe, if you're not familiar with him. He was the head of the Jewish community. He was a descendant of Hillel. He was fabulously wealthy. Fabulously wealthy. And the Gemara talks about the meetings he would have and the parties he would throw. I mean, he was very, 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 very wealthy. So he says the following: B'shat pirato shel Rebbe, at the time when he was dying, Zakev eser atzbotav klepei mala. He shook his fist towards heaven and he said, Ribono shel ha'olam, God, galui v'yadui lefanecha, it is known to you, sheyagati be'eser etzbaot b'torah, that I have used all of my 10 fingers, meaning all of my might, to learn Torah. Velo neheneti afilu be'etzba katana, and I got no enjoyment or pleasure, even from my littlest pinky, from all the wealth that I had. And it says, Yehi ratzon milfanecha shehe shalom b'menuchati, may it be your will that I will have peace in my rest, in my repose, meaning when I'm no longer here. Yatzat bat kol, a bat kol, his heavenly voice, came out and said, Yavo shalom yanuchu al mishkavotam. Please come and accept your resting place in heaven. So you have to ask yourself the question, what is he talking about, right? When you read all of the things that he had and all of the enjoyment that he had, a lot of it was because he was wealthy. How could he have this kind of brazenness to say to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, I never enjoyed, even as much as my pinky, all the wealth that I had? Probably what it means is that all of the Category 1 funds I spent on myself, all of the Category 2 funds I spent on my family, and all of the Category 3 funds I spent in the way that you wanted me to. I didn't have any added enjoyment from any of the funds. I didn't misappropriate any of the money you gave me. So it is possible. It is possible. This mistake of commingling the category of funds creates a serious barrier for us in terms of our bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And it impacts both the wealthy person and the non-wealthy person alike. So here's how. The rich person begins to believe that this wealth elevates him and makes him more important and a higher level of being than everybody else, right? He is the person who walks on earth and the rest of the troglodytes are underneath the earth toiling away for H.G. Wells fans. And this is due to the belief that whether he earned the money or he inherited it, right, he is somehow smarter and better than anybody else. And if he accepts that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is the one who gave him the money, then he says to himself, well, the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave me the money because Magile. I am clearly of a better standard than you because he didn't give you the money, he gave me the money. That means he trusts me more. I'm important than you. On the other hand, the people around him believe that in order for them to get their due, they have to go to the wealthy person to get the money, and that this wealthy person deserves being fawned all over because it's not the Kadosh Baruch Hu that's using him as a conduit, but he's the one who writes the check. So I have to enable this idea that he has so that he will give me what I want. Now, I want to go back to that great philosopher Tevye, who told us the same thing in his song, If I Were a Rich Man, where he says, the most important men in town will come to fawn on me. They will ask me to advise them like the Solomon the Wise. If you please, Reb Tevye, pardon me, Reb Tevye, right? Posing problems that would cross a rabbi's eye, and it will make one bit of difference if I answer right or wrong. When you're rich, they think you really know. Right? I mean, this is the problem of believing that we are responsible for receiving and doling out as well. And all of this would disappear if we really understood that we will get what we are supposed to get from the Kadosh Baruch Hu through the means that he selects for us at a time that he deems appropriate. And each channel is just a channel, right? Each way that we get it is just the way that he happened to agree to give it to us. And any desperation focusing on that means is just misplaced. This is a very high level of bitachon. It really, really is. And you need to work on it. What the Chovot HaLevavot says, were the masses to think deeply into the matter and understand that the wealthy neither have the ability nor the power to give or withhold money to anyone other than the one for whom it has been decreed by the Creator, they would not rely on anyone else other than God to provide for them. No person would be worthy of their honor except for one who has been distinguished by the Creator with praiseworthy character traits for which he is worthy to be honored by the Creator. May he be exalted. This last sentence is like really important. Okay, so I know, let me explain it a little bit. If we truly had bitachon, if we truly had this level of bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and we understood how he runs the world, then our priorities would be correct, right? So we would understand who should be honored and who should not, who should be respected and emulated, and not what we have today, right? The famous example is, in the scheme of things, a teacher is more important to our long-term health and well-being as a society than a soccer player. Who gets honored more, soccer players or teachers? Right? Soccer players. It's because our priorities are upside down. And there's a Gemara I know we're quoting a lot of Tevye and Gemaras today, but there's a Gemara in Masechet Pesachim, very famous Gemara. It says, Ki hai de Rabbi Yosef de Rebbe Hoshua ben Levi, chalash ve'it nagid. So he was deathly ill, and he fell to his sick bed, and after a while he recovered, Ki hadar, when he came back. Amar le avua, his father said to him, my chazit, what did you see? right? You were obviously in some sort of trance or delirium, and you could tell that he was dreaming. So he said, what did you see? Olam hafuch ra'iti. I saw an upside-down world. So what's an upside-down world? He says, Elyonim lamata v'tachtonim lemala. People who we consider to be important were treated like they were lowly, and people who we are mivazbez, right, who we denigrate, were held up to great esteem. Amar lo, Reb Shua ben Levi said to his son, Beni, my son, Olam barur ra'it. You saw a clear world. You saw the world as it should be. In the Olam ha'emet, that's how the world should run, right? And then he said, Va'anan heichechatam. What about Torah scholars? I'll find that this should be true. He says, what about Torah scholars? He says, Ki hafi de'itu anan hata. Hafi itinan hata. Just like we're treated here, we're treated in Olam ha'emet. I guess in the days of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, then Torah scholars were treated with a great deal of respect, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu was going to treat them similarly. So another benefit of having bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu is our life priorities in terms of how we see each other get straightened out. You can begin to see not a topsy-turvy world, but a world that is clear. So, in my opinion, the real test of bitachon is not when you have too much, but really too little. What if you lost your job or you lost your source of income and you feel abandoned? On the other hand, what if you're just not making ends meet and are struggling? It's hard to have the same level of bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu that he's going to provide you than when you're doing well. Right, so Rabbeinu Bafia offers two ideas that we should keep in mind and keep reinforcing to yourself, right, until things improve. So he says, if you have lost your source of income, you should say this. The proper thing for a person who trusts in God to do during the days which his livelihood is withheld for him is to say to himself, he who brought me out of the womb into this world at a specific time in a specific moment, and who did not bring me into the world before that time or afterwards, he is the one who is withholding my subsistence from me until a specific time and a specific day in accordance with what he knows is best for me. I know what I'm going to get is guaranteed. It is being withheld for now. God brought me into this world, and he will deliver like he always does, always promise, at some future date. And he likewise determined that we wouldn't do well for this period, right? So it would be wise to trust this decision and to try and figure out why at this particular time we're going through these hardships. And if you're not making ends meet, source 10, he says, similarly, when his sustenance comes to him but is limited, and he receives no more than what he needs for his food, it's proper to think to himself and say, he who prepared my food for me in the bosom of my mother when I was born, according to my needs and enough to sustain me each and every day until he exchanged it for better food, and the fact that the milk was limited but did not harm me whatsoever, so too this limited sustenance, which is according to my needs, to which God has currently brought me, will not harm me whatsoever, even if it continues this way until the end of my life. In other words, when we were born, the Kadosh Baruch Hu figured out a way to sustain us, right? When he gave us milk. And then we went to solid foods and the milk stopped. He gave us less solid foods than he gave us milk, and we still survived. So if we're getting a limited amount, then this is what we need for ourselves physically and spiritually. Even though he may be allotting us less food, and we have to think about our situation along those lines. God made the decision, this is for my good. and I'm sure things will work out. We have time to start this next topic. So this is category 3, right? We go up one level on Maslow's hierarchy to social needs. Any questions before we move on? We all live in a social world where our interactions with people all around us can also be a source of insecurity and can detrimentally impact our bitachon in the Borei Olam. So the Chovot HaLevavot starts by positing that an individual in his life or in his situation can either be surrounded by friends and family, or he can be alone or estranged, right? Both offer challenges to our bitachon. So let me talk about tonight just the first one. Loneliness is a big problem. Loneliness is a big problem in our society. Another American statistics, because Americans love to take surveys, that a survey conducted in 2020, that 61% of adults from 18 to 25 reported in the United States that they were suffering from loneliness, right? In the general population, it was 40%, which is outrageous. It's an outrageously large number. Now, lest you think that this is an American problem, across English-speaking countries, Canada, Australia, where I understand they speak English, and the UK, right? They are among the world's loneliest people in the world. And they have a loneliness level, based on this survey, of about 30%. 1 in 3, I know that's 33%. 1 in almost 3 people feel lonely. And this leads to a feeling of abandonment, especially by the Kadosh Baruch Hu. We spoke about this pasuk in Tehillim, where we say, Keli, Keli, lama azabtani. David HaMelech said, my God, why have you abandoned me? Right? And the question is, how do you cope with these feelings? Right? Because it impacts on your ability to connect to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. What should one say to the Kadosh Baruch Hu? Right? How do you turn to the Ribono Ha'olam? What should your basis of bitachon be? And essentially, he suggests 2 stratagems. The first is to realize that you're not alone. Right? You're not alone, you're not abandoned. We are commanded in Sefer Dvarim that we should not mourn for our loved ones excessively. Specifically, they talk about you're not supposed to tear out your hair or claw yourself. And the pasuk starts, Banim atem lashem Elokecha. Right? You are children to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And the reason, and then it says, don't excessively mourn. Don't gash yourself or shave in front of your head because of the dead. It says the reason the pasuk is structured this way is to remind us first that we have 3 parents. We have a mother, we have a father, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And even if our other parents are no longer with us, right, he reminds us that he is always with us. And since this is true, when we feel abandoned, we should take this as an opportunity to get closer to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Chovot HaLevavot says this: if he is a person who seeks the matter of the world to come, spiritual matter, right? If an individual wants to use this time as a way to approach the Kadosh Baruch Hu, then his mind will, without doubt, be more unoccupied and free to pursue these matters when he is alone than if he had a family with which he busied himself. In other words, if you don't have pressures of a family and you're feeling alone, you can now use that time to come close to the Borei Olam. This is why aesthetics would flee from their relatives and houses to the mountains so that they could free their hearts and minds to focus on the service of God. Similarly, the prophets at the time of prophecy would leave their places of residence and seclude themselves so they could free their minds to ponder fulfilling the obligations imposed on them by the Creator. So it gives you the opportunity, and you have to look at it as an opportunity, to explore the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the way that the phrase Keli, Keli, Lama Azavtani is often read is changing the emphasis. It goes Keli, Keli, Lima Azavtani, right? My God, for what purpose have you abandoned me? What is it that you want me to learn? How do you want me to grow? Is this a way that you want me back? He also says, on the other hand, being alone has material benefits, right? You don't need, your needs are fewer. You don't need to work as hard. You have more time to pursue learning goals, spiritual goals. He brings another idea that I'm struggling with and I'm not sure I get. But I'll present it and then I'll give you a suggestion. In order to comfort himself, he should dwell on the fact that the soul is also estranged in this world, and that all of the people of the world are considered strangers in it. In other words, that you're not the only one who's lonely, right? Loneliness is kind of the human condition, and it's very much like the soul. The soul was put in a body and put here, and you come in alone, unless you're like my grandsons who came in pairs, and you leave alone. And he says that for all intents and purposes, we're just travelers here passing through, and take this to heart and allow it to nourish and gladden your soul. And he says, if that doesn't assuage your loneliness, though, then realize that everyone is alone at one point or another, and maybe this particular bout, this situation will pass. I didn't like that. I'll be honest with you. So, does it mean that everyone is lonely at one point or another, and this is just my turn? So, I think what I want to do to understand it, the only way that I've been able to understand it till now, is to borrow from the first two areas, where he said that that if loneliness is the human condition, then it must be that the Kadosh Baruch Hu provides us with the ability to cope with it. Just like he provides us with a basic level of sustenance, he must also provide us with a basic level of ability and talent to cope with a situation like that. So if you have different ideas, or if a different idea comes to you over the course of the week, please let me know. I updated, although I haven't sent you out the link, of last week's shiur. This one should be relatively quick, and we will pick up next week on the flip side of this in terms of family, friends, and how that challenges our bitachon in the Kadosh Baruch Hu every day.